Right, so Steve.
Morning, afternoon.
That's the one. So here we are, episode 6.
Listening. I don't know why. Yes.
But it's this is quite exciting because we are in a new room. We are in the Podbox Cafe.
Yes.
At the South Morton Boxing Club. So we have upgraded from the temporary home we had in the boxing ring.
Yeah.
And we've now created a cafe at the back of the club where other people can record podcasts as well. So not just us waffling on about stuff. Anybody is welcome.
Oh, were they just contact the club, or were they?
Yeah, just contact the club. There's a page on the website. Just get in touch, and then we'll put them in touch with Marky, our producer, and he will book them in for a slot. He's got all the gear. It's a lovely environment. It's a bit hot today, but yeah.
We have to pretend he's not here, but it's quite difficult because he's like sat over there in the corner.
He's looking like a naughty boy in the corner, isn't he?
Yeah. He's blocking the exits as well.
So today,
yes,
this will be our 6th episode, and we've been picking these things in life that help us get through. You know, and we've discussed things like, grief and loneliness and music and meaning and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And today, this was a subject you wanted to talk about, and we're going to talk about a single subject today, whereas we normally try and hook two together.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about.
We'll see how it goes. Maybe we might have.
Yeah, we'll think of things as we go along. We're going to talk about stages of life.
Yes.
So that's the best title I could give it from the idea that you came to me with.
Yeah.
So we're just talking about how you go through life, how stages change, how they affect your development, how they affect. So as it was your subject, do you want to kick off? What brought to your mind?
What brought it to my mind was when we were starting the Cornermen. I won't give her name in case I get what she said wrong, and I don't want to upset her or get in trouble. But I went up to see a very well respected suicide prevention expert. And she'd done my suicide prevention training, and we just got into a conversation really about men's mental health. Mm-hmm. What makes it slightly different? What is mental health? You think mental health, but is there a difference? And one of the main differences that she felt, and I agreed with her, so I'd be interested really is to see how you feel about it as well, and it's one I do talk about. So she said the main difference is really that us men struggle to know when there's been changes and they need to grow up basically and change. So for example, women get physical I don't want to call them symptoms, that's the wrong word, but physical signs that they're in a different stage of their life. So when they first get their periods, it's there's a physical change. There's a massive signal that you have now moved out of childhood, or moving from childhood into adulthood, where you're able to, conceive children. Yeah. And then later on in life, women get the menopause, which is a sign to say, well, the childbearing years are over. You're in a different stage of your life. But men don't have that. We get puberty and we get horny for that doesn't tend to go away, really, does it? But but there's no kind of significance to say, right, you're moving from childhood to manhood. You're moving into a different. You're moving from teenage to then you move into middle age. Then you move it. So there's no kind of definite. So when's the time to? When do you know actually I'm a man?
Well, I think it's more indistinct in our society at the moment, and I would argue that maybe it's been more indistinct than it ever has been, because like you say, there's a physical thing that comes on a woman, and when she starts to have periods, that really is saying, you are a woman. You're coming into this period where you could have children, and like you say, there's a very physical marker of that. And my daughter is 9, and she's actually very keen to enter that phase, and she's very curious about it, and she's asking lots of questions. And you can tell that she wants it to happen because she's, by nature, I think there's a lot of children are. She kind of wants to grow up. She's really looking forward to when she's, into the next year. She's 9 at the moment. She'll be 10 next year. 10 is double digits.
Oh, it's massive when you're a kid, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And at the moment, she's got 2 older brothers who are transitioning up to secondary school. She's already got, older brothers in secondary school and stuff. But, she's thinking, she's talking about when I grow up, which school will I go to? Well, so she's very focused on that development, and she's quite precocious as well. So I think that's something that's on her mind, is like, this is going to happen to me soon. Can't wait for it to happen, because then I will have moved on. I will have developed. But like you say, men have a more indistinct period of puberty. And it's interesting that I think I said in our society at the moment, because I think in other societies it was much more marked, the transition for a man. And one thing that springs to my mind is the Jewish festival of Bar Mitzvah. Yeah. So when a young boy becomes 13, he has a Bar Mitzvah. So the Bar Mitzvah is the celebration. The boy has now become a man, and what it means is there's the celebration we all know about. Do like the band. We do weddings, bar mitzvahs. But it means they take on more responsibilities from the commandments for the Torah. And I think that's the key word. You take on more responsibilities. This is what happens. And if anthropologically you look back, there's lots of societies where this transition was very marked. I mean, a lot of people will have seen, the African scarification that some tribes do. And I always remember when I lived in New Zealand for a year and touring around and learning a bit about Maori history, there was an amazing place they took me to. And they were saying one of the coming of age rituals for these young men was they had this, it's a beautiful, beautiful country. This was up in the North Island, and there was a big rock, which must have been half a mile off the coast. And the young men used to have to swim out.
What about sharks, John?
This is exactly the point. Did you know about this?
Yeah, no.
This is the point. They could get eaten by sharks, so they had to swim out to the rock.
There's got to be a happy medium.
And back round the rocks.
There's got to be a happy medium.
And they had to do this at a certain point of their life. And if they got back without getting eaten by the shark, they were then a man and they were now a warrior. So you take on those responsibilities of defending the tribe, defending your own, and then there's other things you could move on to, such as marriage and all that sort of thing. But that was it. But this is a very definitive rite of passage. So I suppose it's interesting in that you said to the person, listen, now you're ready. Yeah. Let's see if you can make it. Take on this challenge. Go out into the world. Take this, and if you don't get eaten by the shark or drown, you are worthy.
I was thinking that they probably haven't watched Jaws.
No, but Jaws wasn't around in those days.
Culture, it's not. They're not going to hit in.
Yes, but then again, Steve, they would probably have sat there as boys and watched other people get eaten by sharks, which I would have think is much heavier than watching Jaws.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
So they would have known the dangers, and they would have known that I don't know what percentage made it through, but then, talking about definitive markers.
Yeah.
And we don't really have those definitive markers. You could argue that we have definitive markers. I know we've both got children who are going through the driving testing. Yeah. And that's an interesting example of in our society because they're both desperate to get that because then you've got a more of freedom and responsibility. So you're able to drive this car, you're able to drive people around, but we have this test to take on that responsibility. And if you pass that test in our society, that's definitely a stage of life.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things, I think, with men is that you say these are taking on responsibility to me is developing in the stages of life. So then you like say you take the car thing, you go further, you might get married. That means you've got ostensibly responsibility for another person to look after that other person. And then the big change is having children. Now I personally didn't realise in a way. I thought great to have kids, and I had kids late. My first child was 38. But
your first child was 38.
No, not when I had him. No. He wasn't 38.
Very precocious.
I was 38. He was considerably younger.
Yeah.
But yeah. So he, and that was a massive change for me. I had kind of been a bit flippant about that, and it's like, well, it'd be nice to have kids, be great, and all that sort of thing. And when I held him, I was like, oh my God, and I just felt it was such a hinge moment in my life because my perspective totally changed. I realised that I wasn't really just responsible for me. I was almost wholly responsible for this other person. And it changed my perspective on life. Whereas before, I think, not consciously, but I think I had thought, well, I'm going to die in hopefully 50, 60 years' time or whatever. Now I thought, well, almost like I've got to think further into the future, because I've got to make sure that when I do die, I've got to make sure that he's taken care of as best I can. My responsibility continues after my death in a way. Yeah. And the things that I put in to him and lay down for him and I'm able to give him are fundamental for that continuation after my death. Those sort of instilling what we might call, values and responsibilities and all that sort of thing. So, that was a big moment, and we take on these things. But I think in our society, and I think particularly in relation to men, there's an opportunity to not take on these responsibilities. And sometimes that's voluntary and sometimes it's not. You could almost call it a Peter Pan mentality. It's like, I'm not going to take this. I don't want this responsibility. I don't want the family. I don't want this, I'm going to carry on in the life stage where I am now, which is quite fun. I like playing my Xbox. I like, I have all that I want. Why should I want to either pass my driving test, move out of get my own home, get married, have children? Why should I go through that? I don't want to do that. So I think there's an opportunity to almost not go through these stages of life for men because they're not so physically marked. And I think that protracted adolescence, that Peter Pan thing, the island of make believe, if you like, is an opportunity that people take. And I think sometimes it can come unstuck.
I think definitely later in life, if you've not, from what I've seen, if you haven't moved through the stages and you're stuck kind of, people who haven't they haven't developed, they've not taken on any responsibilities maybe, or not taken the steps, or still kind of, there's nothing that's sort of said, right, you've got to take some responsibilities on now. It's time to you can't just sit and play on your Xbox. There's things to do. There's nothing wrong playing your Xbox, but there's just an example of, people who just, there's things to do. I'm sat on my Xbox. I'm not going to go out and looking for a job. That kind of thing is there's nothing really that's, when you get older in life, when people start reaching their 50s and 60s and they look back and they haven't, I think that there's a kind of crash, and maybe that's linked to a midlife crisis in men. I don't know, where they're just like, might have not changed since I was...
Well, we've all got that one mate, or a couple of mates, who, like you say, don't seem to have got stuck in a period of life. And the obvious example is the mate who's a great laugh down the pub, does a bit of gear, will go out any night of the week, and is great fun, and will stay up all night. And we've all been through that stage, and generally you go, look, I can't do that now because I've got the job responsibility, I've got the family, I've got the kids, and so you kind of leave that behind. And somebody doesn't leave that behind, and kind of, to be honest, although that might sound like irresponsible behaviour, sometimes in your early 20s or your teens, it's quite fun, and it can be cool. It can look cool. You can look
to do it.
Yeah, but you can look at your man and think, that's cool, man. He's been out partying all night. He's been having a great time. I'm envious of that, and I'd like to do that. But if he's still doing that when you're in a different stage of life, and he's in his 50s, it looks sad.
But also, I'm often talking to people that they love getting out. We were talking to a building site yesterday about culture. Love getting out on the packet and being one of the boys. And there's a time that is fun. There's a time to do that, but sometimes you have to. There's a stage in life where you go, well, actually, that's not fun. There's other stuff you need to do. Otherwise, it the behaviour becomes destroying to your family, to your relationships, because if you have got children, you've got responsibilities now, like you were talking about. And if I'm out on there's other, you need to do a changeover. Guys have started, coming and taking up boxing is a great example. It's still exciting. You're getting in. You don't have to be boring. But if you want a bit of excitement, go and step in a boxing ring. Challenge yourself to do that. And there's these stages that people need to kind of, if they get stuck in. Well, if I let go of going out, what am I? Who am I? Well, you're going to be. You'll be you. You've done that bit. You can't sustain it forever. Do something else. It's now a different stage of your life. There's different things.
I mean, what you said about going in and going into the boxing ring, and it just strikes me as a parallel with doing that. I'm not saying this is a stage of growing up necessarily, but it strikes me as similar to the shark rock. It's like, go and do this thing that scares you, and you will come out of it a better person. Because you will have to push yourself and
achieve things
and take responsibility for yourself to push those boundaries.
Things don't change if you don't get scared or you don't take a risk. A good example is people when they're thinking, I'm really scared to change my job, but they're hating their job. But if I go and do that, it might be different. If I try and get a different job, but what if I don't like it? What if I'll just stay here where it's safe? You're never gonna break through the barriers you want to get through in your life if you don't take risks and do that scary. If you don't swim around the rock. If you think, I've always wanted to do that, but you don't do it because, well, what if it goes wrong? What well, you're going to get stuck where you are.
Yeah.
And it's just going to kind of crumble and be stale, and you need to keep, I think there's various times you need to keep breaking through your fear barrier.
Yeah, and I think there's an aspect too that breaking through the fear barrier that's interesting to talk about in stages of life and change, which is the vital thing. If you don't change or you think things will never change, and as we often identify in the fact that we're in a suicide prevention service, one of the worst things that can happen in your mental health, which I know can be an airy-fairy word, but one of the worst things that can happen, or almost the definition of your mental health, is a kind of understanding that things are never going to change. So if you get into a thing and you say, listen, my life is awful, my life is shit, and as far as I can tell, it's never going to change. It's always going to be shit. So what's the point? What's the point in carrying on? And that's when the really dangerous... that's a kind of obvious correlation there. I have a shit life which will never change, so why carry on?
I think always the good thing to say there is, well, you've got nothing losing, have you?
Yeah.
If it's really shit, and
then make some change.
You might as well give it a go. And most people, when they go, oh yeah, and then they I gave that a go and it worked. Switch comes on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, if I'm fucking everything shit, there's nothing to lose.
Well, also, yeah. But what that opens up is the possibility that change is possible.
And change is always possible.
And although you're in this bad place, it's a transitory phase of your life. Yeah. Just like the happiness phases are a transitory phase of your life, but you will change.
Yeah.
And it's the realization and understanding that will change. And when that goes, I mean, I would say that's the closest definition I can get to what mental health is. The understanding that things will change. I think then you've got good mental health. If you think this is bad, but it will change. It's good, but it won't always be good. But if you don't have that understanding, I think that's what bad mental health is. So you think my projection into the future is exactly what the present is now.
Well, if you start thinking about the future, you end up worrying anyway.
Yeah.
It's just naturally. I was just saying to people, constantly try and remain in the present, and that's almost grounding, because as soon as we start thinking, like you were saying, as soon as you had the baby, as soon as you're holding your first baby, you start thinking about the future. It's soon.
Well, but that wasn't scary. I mean, it was slightly scary, but it was just like, wow, I've really got and it was kind of, and it was definitely a different stage of my life. It was a hinge moment in my life where things were pre being a father and post being a father. My mentality and outlook was different. And like you say, that is the thing about kids. It is scary because obviously you want to protect them, and they are more important than you. So, and previously in my life, to be honest, nothing had really been more important than me.
I had kids early. I had kids at 24.
Yeah.
And I think at that age, you're not thinking. You're just going in on instinct a lot of the time. So I didn't give it, there wasn't that moment for me. It was just like, right, let's just go. I think when you're 24, you're a bit more kind of, let's just...
Yeah, so this is what happens then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you just, I think that for me was I didn't have that moment, obviously love, but I wasn't. I think when you're 24, and then I had Lily when I was 26, and so. But that's now meant that I'm in a different stage because my kids are grown up.
Yeah,
they've left home, so I'm going through a bit of a kind of empty nest.
Yes,
and I think we've got a cat, and I think I'm obsessed with the cat.
Because you need to look after the cat.
Yeah,
so you have taken on the responsibility.
I do. I was joking with Clip. I think there's something in it that some weekends. Well, Lily's, off and riding, and Maisie's often out with her friends and boyfriend, and so, I mean, thankfully me and Claire have a good relationship, so it's nice to have that space, but it's a definite kind of okay, so because the next stage could be being a granddad.
Yeah. But then in a way...
Hopefully not too soon, Maisie.
I think but I think that's a very interesting stage you're talking about, because I think that generally being a grandparent is seen as a kind of joyous occasion, a bit like children generally is as well. And I think the reason for that is, and it's seen as a positive life stage. I mean, maybe some people don't see it as positive if they're really young, they don't want to be known as a grandparent. But generally, you're talking about taking on responsibility. Now, in a way, it's a light responsibility. People say to me, it's great being a grandparent because you can have them and have the fun bits and then give them back. So you have a lovely Sunday afternoon out and then give them back, so you don't have to go through the Monday morning school thing. So that's interesting. But you're still taking on responsibility. And I think responsibility is the key to changing in life. Taking on that responsibility, taking on these layers of responsibility and accepting them, and trying to do something with them. But interestingly, your stage of life, you're losing that responsibility because, you know, Maisie and Lily are kind of now responsible effectively for themselves. I realise that your responsibility never ends as a parent, but effectively you're kind of you're on a sub bench, you know, and if you're needed, you'll be called, but you may not be needed. So for the moment, just sit down there.
Yeah.
So your relevance has gone down. So you're entering a new stage and change of life, which I think is harder. It's easier to take on a layer of responsibility in a way.
But I changed it. I wanted to change it because, you know, I was loving my past job and I had I could have stayed there. But I had to do something. And the Cornermen was a risk.
Yes.
Right at the beginning, we could have got laughed out of the place.
Yeah.
When we sat and did that crowdfunding in the ring.
Yeah.
You know, or you could, when I approached you, when we spoke about it, you could have gone, fuck off, Steve, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, when we did the crowdfunding appeal, it could have raised nothing.
Yeah.
You know, people could have laughed at what you said. People could have said it not to. And then there was the stepping out of having to, you know, leave a good settled salary, and sort of go where you don't know if you're going to be having enough money in 4 months' time. So I think that was massively important for me in my life, because otherwise I think if I'd have stayed doing what I was doing, which I could have done, I'd start getting bored, probably resentful, you know.
So you decided to swim around the rock. I didn't intentionally bring that metaphor along, by the way. That's just developed in the conversation.
So it's a bit like jumping the shark, but that's something different. We'll do that on a different show.
That's a different meaning. Yeah.
But so I think for me that was a massive, you know, a change I had to do. Yeah. And it's worked out very, very well. But if I'd never had the guts to say to you, I'm thinking this, you thinking something like that, let's have a chat, and then to do it, then I think I would have, I've missed.
But that's another interesting life change, because what you did there was take on another layer of responsibility. Because while you had responsibility working for Emmaus, there were large parts of the organisation that were taken care of for you by the people you were fitting into a structure and doing your thing there. Whereas when you decided to start the Cornermen, it was like, well, there is nothing here. There is no structure, there is no scaffolding, there's nothing at all, and there's no money.
And it's been great fun.
Yes.
Problems to having to overcome. It's been great fun.
Yeah, so you have to do everything.
Yeah. And you know, learning, because you've learned new stuff and you get to meet great people. Yeah. You know, that we've, you know, Colin and all these people that have come in and Richard, that they've got skills and they're happy to pass on to you, and you just think that's the first time I've done stuff. And I think as long as you're honest with people and say, I don't know what I'm doing, can you help me? Yeah. And in these different areas, people bring special skills and speciality to, and like you say, that scaffolding is there now for that organisation. And obviously we're now at a stage where you're looking at taking people on into that, and you can say to them, well, look, this is how it works, this is what it's done, you know, and this is who does this, so I have all these functions. But again, I think that adventure for you was taking on responsibility. And we have talked a lot about stages of life. I know we alluded to it a minute ago. Stages of life, we're talking about almost positive building these layers. But there are other stages of life, and we've alluded to it with you as a parent, now kind of having to step back a little bit from being a parent. And I think this also happens to men maybe a lot. And as we know, the suicide stats for, you know, suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 50, and the highest risk category is 45 to 55. So, no, I'm out of it. I'm way over that. Yeah, I left that behind. I'm 54. Yeah, it's 45 to 50. Oh, okay.
45 to 50.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm 4 years out of it.
Right,
Okay. And whereas you're coming into it. So, So, yes, but I think, and if you look at that stage of life, you've got to ask that question, why? And I think there's also this thing that can happen, and I think particularly to men, it can happen to women as well, but where this responsibility gets taken away from you, and why I'm looking at that stage of life as being particularly dangerous. And like I say, this is just an opinion, this is not verified data facts that I want to talk about, but if you get the collapse, say, of a relationship, you may no longer be living with your children. You may have that, you know, like I say, that relationship, you often got to move out of the home, that maybe, again, that's a layer of responsibility that you have, and you find yourself almost knocked down that pecking order of responsibility of changes of life. You say, well, all of a sudden I'm sat back in the bedsit, you know, I'm renting a room, or I'm renting a house, I'm playing on my Xbox. This is what I was doing 20 years ago, and I was really enjoying it. And now,
it's not the same.
So much has gone, and I don't want to be like this. And often, I think a lot of men think at that stage, you know what, I can't do it again.
Yes,
I can't rebuild
yeah,
again.
I would say that was common.
Yeah, and so this, so this comes out, and so these are stages of life. So in a way, we've all talked about stages of life as being positive. You take on responsibility and you move on and you develop and you change. But in a way, there can also be stages of life that are very difficult to negotiate. And as I've talked about that, the responsibility almost gets stripped away from you, and you're left. Almost, it's like a game of snakes and ladders. You're now at a stage of life you enjoyed 20 years ago, and you're back there, but you're not enjoying it now.
No, I think that we see that, and it's harder when that has happened, because you have to be realistic. You can't. Some people, you can't sort of say everything's going to be brilliant. Because people have lost a lot. But it's about finding there is still responsibility that can be if they've got grandchildren, or there's still massive roles to play, and you've still got to try and encourage people to change is possible, and things can change over. You've just got to figure out kind of what the next stage is. So it's about really trying to encourage people to find something to hold on to.
Yes, I mean, as humans, we don't cope very well with loss.
No.
I mean, it's this thing. If somebody's got £10 million and they lose 5 million, they're absolutely bereft. I've only got £5 million and I had 10 million, so I've lost half my stuff. This is a complete disaster. Whereas somebody else who's got hardly any money and has all of a sudden £5 million would give it, this is the most amazing thing in the world. So like you say, there's that phrase from Shakespeare, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Is if, I don't know, culturally that we don't respect old age as much. Old age is seen as a bad thing now, rather than someone, people being seen as wise maybe. And age is seen as something that we shouldn't have with plastic surgery. We don't want to see age, we don't want to see decay.
No.
And so I think I wonder if that plays on. That's a big part.
But I think, I think it's also we're kind of obsessed with potential, and I think this goes back to why everybody loves a baby, because it's almost unlimited potential. That baby could be president of the United States, or the baby could be a doctor, or the baby could be go into space or whatever. So it's unlimited potential, and a bit like we said about your friends when they were 20 and they were getting wasted. It was still cool, because it's like they had lots of potential still.
Yeah.
And then if they're 50 and they're just getting wasted, they've got no potential.
Yeah.
So, and I think this thing is, a lot of the time the older guys that maybe have lost a lot, like I say, often it causes divorce or relationship breakdown. They feel that they've got no potential to do anything else. And like I say, is that phrase that we do here, I can't do it again. I can't build it up again. So that potential is gone. And I think a lot of us, maybe I'm just speculating, that's a psychological reason why we look at old age and say there is no potential, there is no future. We don't respect what has happened before and what they've done and the experience they bring, because we're looking for future potential, which by the nature of life is not there.
Potential. I always think that there's a kind of fear of death as well involved in it.
Fear of your own death.
Yeah,
a reminder of that.
And if you see it in other people, it reminds you of your own death. And we're all kind of. So I think we don't handle death very well in our culture, and it gets pushed away to a certain extent. That might be part of the reason. But I don't know. I think I'm waffling now. Sorry. Can we cut that out, Marky?
No, we have to do the waffling.
It's getting a bit sweaty. Isn't it?
I know, but it's very hot. But I think that's another. That's almost another discussion of how we deal with death, because I think we deal with death very, very badly. Now, and we've got this.
Death, didn't we?
We did, yeah. We've divorced ourselves from death. We don't see dead bodies. We know all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We almost lie about it. We almost lie to ourselves about it, that it doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
We don't want to speak to people who've just experienced a death in their family. We just shy away when we should. I think be doing the opposite. But like I say, that's another conversation. But it does bring us though to the stages of life. Because there are stages of life before death. If we're talking about going through these layers of responsibility, taking on responsibility, and then we're talking about some of that responsibility being stripped away, and how you deal with that and how you develop. And then I think you get to this end point of life, and it can be quite a long period at the end, because you don't know. Most people don't know when they're going to go. And I think you could almost define that as legacy. And I would see that. I unfortunately never met your dad, but you've talked to me a lot about what he did at the end and all that sort of thing. And I would see that as him, even if you didn't consciously think about it, about leaving a legacy. And the legacy was kind of decency, respect, honour, kindness, that was the legacy that he left. And I think he must have thought about that. I want to see, how are people going to see me? How are people going to react to me? How are people going to remember me? You know, and
so there was a responsibility right up to the deathbed.
Yes.
So
well, it took on that responsibility.
So it gives meaning. So it's holding on to meaning right to the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which to me, you know, as I said before, psychologically looks the correct thing to do. Having seen people die bitter, and people die, you know, like my dad.
Yeah. And I mean, and funny enough, talking about death, there was a thing that was very prevalent, you know, up until about, well, you know, we used to have public executions in this country, and especially among the working class.
Where's this going? I didn't see.
Well, it was about having a good death.
Yeah, right.
It was seen as your responsibility to have a good death, to show a brave face to the world, to stand on the scaffold and sing a poem, you know, and to stand on the scaffold and show your defiance, you know, unto death.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people didn't take that responsibility because you could also drink quite a lot, you know, the old sort of one for the road and on the wagon, which was all linked to that execution.
Just up in Tyburn?
Yes, so what I'm talking about is, so you'd go from where the Old Bailey is, which was Newgate Prison, you'd be taken on a cart down to Tyburn, which is where Marble Arch is now. And on that journey...
I think you showed me in London.
Yeah, I think we'd show you where the Tyburn tree was.
Yeah.
So that was the place of execution for hundreds of years in London. Yeah. And you would be given one for the road along the way, so you could take this ale and drink it.
I'll definitely have one.
Yeah, but then when you were on the wagon for the last time...
I've been needing a wee after.
Yeah, well, I don't think they've worried too much about stuff like that. But but then so you could just get absolutely.
Like just need a quick bit.
Yeah, he disappeared again.
That's it.
But this idea of putting your face to the world and saying, look, with defiance, this was defined as a good death.
Yeah,
he was defiant to the end, and he, you know, some would be repentant, some would be whatever, some would be, you know, holy tracks, and you know, and that came right through society. I mean, you know, Charles I, when he was executed on the scaffold, he said, "Please, can I have an extra shirt to wear? It's a very cold day. I don't want people to see me shivering and think that I'm shaking with fear. I do not want to show any fear. You know, I have to face it." And you know, and again, he did. He kind of, and people respected that afterwards. I mean, you know, he was brave to the end.
Yeah.
So I think that's that, and I think that's still something in our society. We still want that good death. You know, we still want people to see us. You know, we don't want to be seen, you know, in a bad light as almost the last memory that people see of us.
Yeah. You know, I wonder if they thought he'd put he's put on a couple of pounds.
Yeah. He's been eating well.
It's like just a big jumper. I want something on my neck. Yeah. Really got a cold neck. Yeah. So really, so nice. Yeah. So I think it's, if people are feeling stuck, I think, you know, what's going on? Why? All right. Look at what's going on. Well, what do you do? Well, I'll keep. You know. Do you need to start thinking about the stage and accepting the stages? Like I'm 45 now, so I'm at that struggle of, I'm 45, I'm going to be 50 soon. I'm not a young man anymore. Well, and we talked about as well about obvious stages of life in a way that are coming in, and grey bits.
The grey bits, yeah. Well, I've got to this stage, like I said to you earlier, I'm 54, and now I have quite a lot of friends that are starting to retire. And I'm like, you what? And I've got a good friend of mine drove a bus in Dublin for 30 years. And so you do 30-year shift over there, you're out. You know, it's almost like a civil servant, you know, like we do in the police over here. It's like, right, here's your pension, off you go, final salary pension. You know, another good friend of ours, Dino, has done, again, he's done a 30-odd year shift at BT, got a nice pension, he's out. Yeah. And it just, I'm still... You know, mentally, I'm like, yeah, well, I understand. But I'm like, you what? Haven't we only really just, you know, we're only just, you know, I haven't sort of, because my own retirement, I haven't really thought about. No. And maybe I sort of should do. Yeah. I've got vague notions and vague ideas.
I can't imagine you retiring.
No, and I'm kind of not ready. And I don't think that would be something that comes into my head. So it's strange for me to have a peer group of retired people.
Yeah. But, I mean, if they're coming to the club, I think there's a kind of, there's an accepting your age in, but without accepting it, that you seem to have got a nice balance, which I'm hoping to emulate, which is, I'm going to age, but I can still need to try and be as fit as I can for my age.
Well, this is one of the things I always say to people, because obviously I work largely as a personal trainer, and I always find it amazing that people come to me and say, I used to train when I was younger, but you know, kids, wife, all that sort of thing. And sometimes they come into the club and they're coming back and trying to get some fitness but you know, I always think it's just, I find it crazy because I think when you train when you're younger, you train for fun, you train for sport, you train to look good for the ladies, you train to whatever you do.
I didn't train when I was...
Well, you got married, you could stop trying at 24.
Yeah,
so, but whatever the reason and rationale is, training is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And it's like the training is it's a byproduct of trying to get something else or get somewhere else or get faster on the football field or look better down the pub, whatever it is. But I think when you get older, training should be compulsory. It's vital.
Yeah.
You must do it.
Yeah.
Because, your body will forgive you if you're between 20 and 25 and you stop training and you start training again at 25. Your body will be like, yeah, we'll quickly bounce back. We'll quickly bounce back into shape. But if you stop at 40 and then try and come back at 45, it's a different story.
Yeah.
It doesn't forgive you like that. You've got a metabolic decline, you've got a musculoskeletal decline, and you can't reverse that, but you can arrest it. So you must train, the older you get.
But that's recognising the signs, though.
Yeah, and like I said to you, it's not reversing. You're not going to be 21 again, but you will arrest that decline, and that's what you want to do. You kind of want to go gently into that good night.
Yeah, and be as fit as you can for as long as you can.
Yeah.
You can keep taking on responsibility.
Yes,
and being useful.
And things are going to happen. Like you are going to get bangs. You are going to fall over. Things like that. And the problem is, older people fall over. They damage themselves because they haven't got a sort of muscular protection, muscular armour. I think it was like body armour, to protect that joint, and then they can't train, and then it's a vicious circle. You know what I mean? So you've got to keep that strength up. So when you as soon as you start thinking about it, you think, this is basic. You must train when you get older. Rather than
it's interesting.
On the stop, rather than Well, our societal
it's called calm down now and stop. No, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if you look at the cover models on Men's Health, look at the people doing sport. It's all young people. They're associated with training in gyms.
Yes.
And I don't think it should be like that, because I think, again, stages of life, it's like, okay, you got to realise, like I realise, I'm in a later stage of life, so it's really important to keep fit and train.
Now, don't you?
Yeah, I've adjusted my training.
Do more weights now.
I do more weights to keep those, to keep that body armour on.
Yeah.
And to protect myself.
Yeah. Well, it's still recognising the cycles, isn't it? And
yeah.
It's just making as strong as you can.
Yeah.
Jesus, hot in here, John.
Yes, can we stress this is not the Podbox Cafe is inherently hot. We're in the middle of an extreme heat wave, and it is 31 degrees outside, and we haven't got any aircon.
No, yeah.
So normally it would be much more pleasant. So anybody thinking about hiring this room, don't hire it in a heat wave, maybe.
Yeah. But it's just wow.
Yeah. So anything else to say on stages of life? I think we've gone from the cradle to the grave.
Yeah.
We've thought about what we want to
come across what I was trying to say, but I think it is.
I mean, did you want to go back as well to you talked about what highlighted it to you were the physical changes that occur with women that don't necessarily occur with men?
Yeah, I just I think that we struggle to know when to stop being a boy. So some men do. And we all do to a certain extent, and we're not going to be. There's a danger of being trapped in that Peter Pan. So when you do get married and you have children, some people can become an extra child, or we can all be a bit of an extra child, where people sat on the Xbox while the wife's. Things change when the children come along. You're now a father, and I think some people struggle, or we can struggle to kind of know that. Hang on, my life's changed now. I need to start taking on responsibility. I'm not to be looked. Don't want to be looked after forever. It's not a great look.
Yeah.
And so I think there's the essential change that sometimes needs to go. I think we kind of get it. And I think I had to get it more, and still try. Claire would probably argue with that, saying there's still, but because my wife was older than me, I definitely didn't want to feel like I was, an extra child.
Yeah,
I wanted to, and so be a bit, and so I think people can get stuck and then that's where relationship problems happen. Where, why is my missus always having a go at me? Well, what's going on? Well, she won't let me sit, and my dinner's not ready when I get home. Okay, well maybe you need to cook for yourself a bit. I don't know. But for example, and then when we get to when we get to our kind of middle age, to kind of accept that. And move on, and just those state and enjoy it,
Yeah.
Should not just go, oh, this is it. Oh, okay, I've done that bit. I've been out with the lads and everything. I've done that bit. Now I'm doing this bit where I'm, a young dad and I'm doing, father of things. This is a stage when my kids have left home. Now I'm going to be doing this now. I'm going to enjoy it. And then another stage where, okay, I'm in my 50s, but, I'm going to make sure I do my exercises and take on a new challenge that scares me. I'm going to enjoy it, When I'm older, I'm going to try and be as healthy as I can and try and, help others or whatever. But just kind of know that we're in our stages and they're changed and appreciate it.
And I think embrace those stages as you go along. And don't be afraid of those stages.
It's part of life's journey. Don't want to be a teenager forever, young lad. It ends up looking sad when you are the guy in the pub, his 50s, on the packet, trying to chat to all. Change, go through people. We need to break through the barriers. We need to keep swimming around a rock.
Yeah. Find your rock.
Yeah. And swim around it at least 4 or 5 times, unfortunately.
Yes. Well, it'll be a different rock each time, won't it?
Okay, it's different animal. Octopus.
Yeah, we could go on forever and define this. First of all, you've got the shark rock, then you've got the octopus rock. There'd be a book in this.
Yes.
And then,
we've not jumped.
Then you go to the piranha rock. And then, and these are all the different stages of life. Somebody could take that and be on every chat show.
Well, hopefully we haven't jumped the shark on this episode. Do you know what jump the shark?
I do know what jump the shark means. It refers to that Happy Days episode where things got so sad they jumped a shark on the water skis.
Run out of ideas.
They totally run out of ideas.
Yeah.
So we haven't run out of ideas.
No.
And I think the shark rock is not jumping the shark.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So one day we might get to the jump the shark episode on this podcast, but it's not today.
I think if we still got the plunge pool here, John.
Yeah. Put a shark in there.
I might just run and jump in that.
Yeah. Well, there is the stream out the back.
No, I'm not doing that.
Okay. All right. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, John.
Nice one.
Cheers, Marky.
Next month. Cheers, Marky.